Welcome to the second of our election sessions on defence and security. Michael Fallon was here last week talking about Conservative policy on defence and security, and on Monday Lord Wallace of Saltaire will be with us to talk about Liberal Democrat policy on defence and security. But today we have Vernon Coker speaking to us about Labour Party policy as we go into the election. Vernon Coker, as you know, has been Shadow Secretary of Defence, Shadow Spokesman on Defence since October 2013. Before that, he was Shadow on Northern Ireland. He has a ministerial career in the Home Office, dealing with policing, and in the Children's, Families and Schools Ministry, where he was a Minister of State. He is also, only last night, was in Gedling, where he is the candidate for Gedling. He's not the MP now, he's the candidate for Gedling, so he's in and out of his constituency in Nottingham, as well as holding down the defence and security portfolio. I should say, please, phones off. Please don't just put them to silent. They will interfere with the AV system, so please put your phones off, or we'll get the galloping clicks at some point. All of this, the speech and the Q&A, is on the record, and we will have a hard stop in 58 minutes' time at 12 o'clock. So, Mr. Coker, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here at RUSI. It's an honour and privilege again for me to be back here. RUSI remains at the centre of the debates on the UK defence and security, and I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity to address all of you here this morning. A few months ago, I stood here and said that on defence, Labour would be both ambitious and realistic. Ambitious because I believe that to withdraw from the world is not just undesirable but impossible, and because I believe Britain can play a positive role in the international community. My own party, the Labour Party, has a proud record in helping to secure the relative peace and prosperity that we have enjoyed since the end of the Second World War. All the way back to the dark days of 1940, when Attlee and Greenwood, as members of the War Cabinet, backed Churchill in fighting on against Nazi Germany right the way through to today, where Ed Miliband has backed airstrikes against the murderous barbarism of ISIL in Iraq that threatens not just the region, but indeed the wider world. And our decisions in opposition regarding the use of military force have reflected that. But can I be absolutely clear from the outset? This is not and never will be a non-interventionist policy, but a smart interventionist policy. And we will be realistic, because there are no gains to be made from promising what cannot be delivered. There is nothing patriotic about describing defence cuts as a betrayal of our national heritage in opposition, only to delete entire capabilities in government. We have to accept that the fiscal position remains difficult. The next few years will not be easy. And so a hard-headed realism is the only way through to ensuring we have responsive, high-tech armed forces with the capability to respond to emerging interconnected threats in an unpredictable security landscape. So as we seek permission from the British people to govern in a little under 3 weeks' time, it will be ambition and realism that guide our defence policy. I also believe we have to acknowledge that the legacy of the past interventions, particularly the Iraq invasion of 2003, is challenging. This isn't the place to rehearse the arguments about the merits of those conflicts, but we have to accept that our armed forces have been shaped by a decade of conflict, and the British public have become far more sceptical about the use of military force abroad. So before committing to military action in the future, they understandably expect the government to ensure that any armed intervention is properly thought through, with a clear set of well-communicated strategic objectives and robust exit strategies in place. Labour has learned the lessons of the past, and our decisions in opposition regarding the use of military force has reflected that. And let me make it clear at this point that if we do form the next government, we will continue the fight against ISIL in Iraq. So I'm clear that our militarily capable armed forces are vital to the UK and its interests. Military power is not an alternative to, but acts as a support for political solutions. Our armed forces project power on a global scale, and they deter potential enemies. Now, in the last week, there has been some focus on my party's commitment to the future of the UK independent nuclear deterrent, some of it rather below the standards we would set. But let me be absolutely clear. We are committed to the renewal of Trident. We are committed to the retention of a continuous at-sea deterrent, and we will follow the advice of experts in terms of delivering that, who say currently technology means 4 boats. Britain's independent nuclear deterrent has been the cornerstone of the UK's defence and security for over 60 years. It was Attlee and Bevin who first saw the need for Britain to have a nuclear deterrent. It was Wilson and Healey who took the decision to commit to the Polaris system. And it was Tony Blair's government that began the process of renewing Trident. And if elected, it will be Ed Miliband's government that will commit us to successor. We cannot know what threats we may face in the coming 40 years. And that is why it is right to renew the deterrent in the next Parliament. Keeping our country safe is the first duty of government, and the deterrent is the ultimate safeguard of that security. At the same time, however, I want to emphasise that Labour remains determined to work with nuclear and non-nuclear states for a world without such weapons. A future Labour government will set out to lead international efforts for multilateral disarmament and non-proliferation, and we will play a full role in the NPT conferences. This is a time of multiple and complex global challenges, a far more uncertain security landscape than was envisaged in 2010 by the current government and indeed its national security strategy. Countries such as Syria, Iraq, Nigeria and Yemen and Libya are being torn apart by internal conflict, helping to incubate groups such as ISIL and other ideologically affiliated groups from whom we face a growing terrorist threat. While from Putin's Russia comes a growing hostility with military breaches of sovereign territory that we hoped had been consigned to Europe's past. Humanitarian crises are causing death and human misery with growing regularity and increasing scale, while new threats emerge from new domains like cyber seem to grow at an exponential pace. Our defence and security policies need to navigate this unpredictable and changing landscape by offering certainty and stability at a time when government spending is necessarily constrained. And there is also a domestic context, which in strategic terms may prove even more important. Despite the comfortable victory of the No campaign in the Scottish referendum, questions remain. I know I don't need to tell you what the breakup of our union, the most successful union of nations in history, would do to our position in the world. But let me also be clear about this. A future Labour government will do no deals with the SNP over the deterrence or the defence and security of our national interest, despite what some say. And we also have the prospects of an EU referendum as soon as 2017 if the Conservatives win the election. This will not only cause untold certainty in the run-up to the referendum, but would threaten to tear Britain adrift from its strategic anchor and undermine the basis of so many of our global partnerships. On so many issues that matter, security in Central Europe and indeed the Middle East, the EU is an indispensable force multiplier for its members, including the UK. In 2010, the government trumpeted their rejection of strategic shrinkage, yet in the last 5 years, Britain has lost influence in Europe and in the wider world. This light touch approach has left us globally less relevant than we were just 5 years ago. I won't take lessons from the Tories on the need for a commitment to strong defence, not least given the incompetence they've displayed in recent years in managing the MOD, aircraft carrier programme, maritime patrol aircraft and procurement reform. The deletion of key capabilities have diminished us in terms of our ability to project power and our ability to defend ourselves and our interests. And recruitment is chaotic. And nothing, to me, sums up more than that approach than the phrase uttered by a cabinet minister when told by backbenchers to commit to greater resources for the armed forces, saying there are no votes in defence. The government provided us over a strategic defence and security review that was strategic in name only. It began by asking what could be cut instead of focusing on ensuring we have a strong, high-tech armed forces equipped for many emerging interconnected threats of the 21st century. As General Sir Rupert Smith put it with his characteristic eloquence when asked about SDSR 2010, said it was incoherent nonsense. A new Defence Minister, Philip Dunn, has said that he expects SDSR to be a refinement of the existing plan, not a major refresh. That means Britain risks another financially driven SDSR, resulting in potentially even greater strategic vacuum and widening gaps in our military capabilities and a further erosion of Britain's role in the world. And we reject that approach. So as the Labour manifesto sets out, one of our first acts in government will be to conduct a wide-ranging review of Britain's place in the world and how we can best uphold our values and the national interest. The review, commissioned by and reporting directly to the Prime Minister, will provide the backdrop to the National Security Council's existing work. Importantly, the review would ensure that aspects of foreign policy that don't fit neatly into a security framework are given due weight, including, for example, the importance of our relationship with Europe and our strategy for engagement with other multilateral institutions alongside our continuing and primary commitment to NATO. And this work would take place in parallel to the Strategic Defence and Security Review and will provide its baseline. Our SDSR will be strategically led, asking the searching questions about which threats we face and how we deal with them. 2 carriers, the regeneration of MPA, the need to refresh Army 2020 and Future Force 2020, and the upgrading of our ISTAR capability are all major issues that we will need to address, alongside recruitment to 77 Brigade and the need for forces able to combat new forms of hybrid warfare. And we will ensure it is funded by carrying out the SDSR alongside the comprehensive spending review. So I can announce today, that we will publish a green paper within the first few weeks of government that will set out the parameters of the SDSR. We want a discussion that involves the public, involves industry, involves experts and former military personnel, as well as existing professionals, to try and build a consensus. Our approach will be open and inclusive, a stark contrast with the government's current approach. In short, we will look to fill the strategic vacuum we believe is at the heart of government. We will build on the work of the previous government, though, by treating defence and security as separate sides of the same coin, because we must do all we can to prevent a latent threat becoming a patent one. The lesson of history is that deterrence is the best course of action. We have to be realistic about what we can achieve through SDSR. There is a limited impact we can have on 2019-20 from here in 2015. This, of course, is because so much of what we seek to achieve takes so long to realise. But this doesn't mean we can't achieve a lot with an ambitious approach. We can go much further to make our partnerships work more effectively. A P5 member, a leading EU country, the second largest contributor to NATO, a founding member of the G7, and a central partner in the Commonwealth. We're the only country that can say that. We need to be confident in the role we can play, the role we should play, and the role, indeed, that we will play. Yes, our relationship with the US and other English-speaking countries is strong, special even. The special relationship between the US and the UK will remain the bedrock of our security posture. It is important and it will remain so. But we can be even more effective. There is a clear need to engage with both unconventional and conventional threats. So a Labour government will make a partnership in defence more than just an aspiration, interoperability more than just a word. We welcomed the Lancaster House treaties. We welcome any attempt to improve close working with France. However, when the government justified its decision to fit cats and traps to our new carriers on the grounds that it would improve joint working with the French, it simply wasn't credible. It was clear that this was a decision based on immature thinking and is perhaps the best indication of the rushed approach to the SDSR taken by the last government. With a realistic and ambitious approach to defence diplomacy, we can build better partnerships, improve joint working, and make the most of our strategic partnerships to the benefit of the UK and our allies. NATO, as I've said, is and must remain the foundation of our defence and security partnership, and we work tirelessly to ensure its greater effectiveness. We will remain committed to the strengthening of our collective response to Russia, but we want to build on our relationships outside the NATO alliance as well. The burgeoning relationship with Japan, our deep links with Australia, New Zealand, Canada will all be a priority. Strengthen our bilateral partnerships and multilateral alliances through defence diplomacy and joint working will be one of our central goals. The SDSR will also look at whether we can make a stronger commitment to supporting UN peacekeeping missions. It remains a significant weakness of today's international system that military operations mandated and financed by the UN Security Council often receive limited operational support from the most capable military powers. Out of 105,000 uniformed personnel deployed on UN missions today, 289 were from the UK, the 51st largest contributor in the world, with almost all of these in Cyprus. Labour will restore Britain's commitment to fragile and conflict-affected states where appropriate. Such outward-looking participation is all part of a robust defence policy that is in line with Britain's traditions and is something that we wish to deepen. Similarly, new types of threats, such as cyber, will increasingly test the resilience of the UK critical infrastructure networks, such as our power and energy supplies. In the face of increasing sophistication, serious questions need to be asked about the nature of the cyber threat facing the UK. Labour has already called on the government to ensure that every company working with the MOD, regardless of its scale or size, signs up to a cyber security charter. Building on this, we will also consult on the prospect of creating a statutory requirement for all private companies to report serious cyber attacks threatening the UK's national infrastructure. We must always also honour the sacrifices made by our armed forces for our country, especially in the two lengthy wars they have fought since 2001. Britain's combat role in Afghanistan may have ended, but supporting our veterans, their families and our forces will remain a priority for us. The military covenant is crucial, and rhetoric must be made a reality in every area. We must support veterans and their families. They have done their duty, and we must do our duty by them. I've been appalled by some stories of military personnel subjected to verbal abuse, prejudice or violence, simply for wearing their uniforms. That is why we will introduce an Armed Forces Prevention of Discrimination Bill in the first Queen's speech. We will also create a veterans register to ensure our veterans receive proper support on leaving service. We will continue to roll out the Veterans Interview Programme, in which companies voluntarily guarantee an interview for job-seeking ex-forces personnel. We will continue to support the creation of an Armed Forces Credit Union, providing financial advice and products such as savings, loans and mortgages tailored to the specific needs of service families. And furthermore, we will enshrine the military covenant into the constitution of the NHS. This means, for example, that we will create a new right to talking therapies in the NHS constitution, just as people currently have to drugs and medical treatments. And over the longer term, we will set out a strategy to deliver a waiting time standard of 28 days for access to talking therapies. And we will do all we can to ensure NHS staff are trained so that mental health problems are spotted and dealt with at an earlier stage. The UK defence industry represents one of the great success stories of our economy. At our best, we are world-class, competitive, innovative, skills-rich, providing opportunity, employment and security for thousands of people. A Labour government will continue to support the Defence Growth Partnership. We will work to secure defence jobs across the UK, protect the supply chain and work with industry to grow Britain's defence exports. In partnership with industry, we will put accountability, value for money and sustainability at the centre of defence procurement. We recognise that major efficiencies in the MOD budget can be found through reform of the procurement process. The problematic issues of defence procurement are systemic and widespread and have become so over decades. And we will build on the independent review we published in 2001, produced in cooperation with senior figures from industry and business, by ensuring that there is a longer-term project management within the department. We will also provide industry with the clarity it requires to deliver projects on time and on cost. Seek clearer delivery targets for industry and the MOD, and better prioritise and factor in exports within procurement proposals. And we want to build a highly skilled workforce that helps sustain and grow advanced manufacturing in the defence industry and beyond in this country. And we plan to work with industry to boost apprenticeships by giving employers greater ownership of skills, a something for something deal on apprenticeships to tackle the weak school-to-work transition for young people and ensure employers can get the skills that they need. And we will build on existing institutions to do this. We will build on the industrial councils and the industrial partnerships, but would like to see these strengthened so that they are playing a core role in addressing the challenges facing industries such as skills. And we will encourage universities to play a stronger role in supporting growth in their regions. We will create new technical degrees that are co-designed and co-delivered by universities and businesses. So to conclude, there are concerns there is a need for a much greater emphasis on strategic thinking in the next SDR, which a future Labour government would provide. And we will work to relieve the pressure on our armed forces and their family. I believe we can turn these things around. I am ambitious about the future and for the future of UK defence. We have to resist those who say we can no longer play the central role we once did. By the end of the decade, we will have taken the decision to renew Trident, delivered new attack submarines and armoured vehicles, and be close to the full regeneration of our carrier strike force. This is still a significant military presence. We will remain a global power in all three domains. Of course, there will be difficult choices to make in the coming months and years, but our goal must be to provide the clear-headed strategic leadership that our country needs, filling the strategic vacuum at the heart of government left by the previous 5 years. And we will carefully set priorities that are both ambitious and realistic. We will be a pragmatic but a progressive government if elected, proud of our internationalism and confident of Britain's continuing role in the world. Thank you very much indeed.
Vernon, thank you. Pragmatic, progressive and proud are the 3 Ps you ended with. OK, we've got 35 minutes, just over. We are still on the record. Lots of questions. Who would like to begin? Paul Ingram, you caught my eye first. You need a microphone, Paul, just because of the acoustics.
Paul Ingram from Basic. Vernon, what does it mean when you say that you would include Trident in the Defence Review?
Well, obviously what we're saying with that is we will look to see the best way of delivering the continuous at-sea deterrent. Our commitment is to a continuous at-sea deterrent, and the emphasis is on the word continuous. We want to see how that can best be done, how that can best be achieved. And alongside that, Paul, as I've made clear in many debates and discussions within my own party, but with others, that is the policy that we have. That is a very clear statement of our policy. But alongside it, you'll have also heard in the remarks that I made our clear commitment to also work in a multilateral way to try and strengthen the efforts that have been made with respect to disarmament, with respect to reduction in nuclear stockpiles and to prevent proliferation. So I think, as I say, a very strong sense, this is what we stand for, this is what a future Labour government will do. We want to do it in the most cost-effective way. We will look at that, but alongside that, we will redouble our efforts with respect to multilateralism as well.
OK, thank you. Caroline Flynn-McLeod. No, I'll come down here.
Hi, Caroline Flynn-McLeod. Vernon, a year ago, I asked you about something that very few people were talking about. It's on the lips of everyone now. 3 words, actually, 2%. I heard nothing, no commitment to NATO 2%. Great words here, quite encouraging about the deterrent commitment to NATO. Your concerns about capabilities that have been lost, your worry about the strategic environment. But to deal with that, it is pretty obvious that we are going to have to make a very firm commitment to NATO. Can you please make that NATO 2% commitment? And if you can't, why not?
Well, look, let's be clear about this, because, as I say, I don't want to create any or be unclear about that. We have said that we will conduct a strategic defence and security review, and that we will conduct the comprehensive spending review alongside that, and that we will fund what is necessary from the Strategic Defence and Security Review. but we will do it strategically. And if there are some things we can't do because we haven't got the budget, then we will look at that and say these are the choices that face the country. Now, we are saying, I just want to make this clear as well, we are also signed up to the government's 15-16 budget. So, that we have no plans at all to change that. So, as far as I'm aware from what I'm told, that means we've met the current government are meeting the target this year, and for 15-16 the 2% will met. But it's what happens beyond that, which is the point that you're making. I would contrast that, it's a sort of, without trying to be too political, it is about what a Labour government would do. And I would contrast that although not committing to the 2%, we're also not signed up to the budgetary assumptions being made by the Chancellor in his last budget, which, although I may not satisfy people who want 2% committed, if you look at what the Chancellor said in the budget for budget reductions over the first 3 years of the next government, Conservative government, should it win, to eliminate the deficit by 17-18 will require quite draconian cuts in departments outside of those that are protected. Now, we are not signed up to that economic budgetary assumption that the Chancellor made. We have said we will get rid of the deficit as soon as possible within the next Parliament, not by 17-18, and we're not seeking to generate a surplus on the current account in doing that. So the flexibility for us is much greater, actually, than for the current government. I mean, you've seen the Institute of Financial Studies, the IFS estimate, outside of protected. If there isn't a change to what the government is saying, it will mean a 16% reduction in the MOD budget, and that's an IFS figure. Now, we're not signed up to that. So we may not be signed up to the 2% figure, but we do not accept the budgetary assumptions that the current government are making, so that gives us greater flexibility within that. Now, that doesn't satisfy everybody with respect to the 2%. So I'm making I'm not saying that therefore I am saying we'll do 2%. But what I am saying is there is flexibility for a future Labour government within the budget assumptions that we're making to look at how we fund defence in the way that we think is appropriate and is identified by the Strategic Defence and Security Review.
Thank you. I have to say, when most of the parties won't address the issue or avoid the answer, that is a clear statement.
Well, all I'm saying is that
you cannot sign up to it at this stage.
At this stage, we cannot sign up. Now, where we get to, and that's what I'm saying, will be identified by the SDSR. And let's be clear about this, Caroline. But I think is extremely helpful, frankly, for any government, whichever government it is, to be, if I'm being blunt about it and putting my national interest hat on, to actually say, these are the threats we've identified, and this is the budget, and looking at the two. And there are choices for any government to make for that. All I'm saying is that a future Labour government, because we're not signed up to the budget of George Osborne a few weeks ago, have a greater flexibility within the allocation of those resources. Now, it may be, who knows? But all I'm saying, that's where we are at the present time.
Thank you. Thank you. Lady there, you just need a microphone.
Thanks,
you.
Caroline.
Louisa Brooke-Holland with the House of
I
Commons.
beg your pardon?
Louisa
Please.
Brooke-Holland with the House of Commons Library. You mentioned about the Armed Forces Prevention of Discrimination Bill in the first Queen's speech. Can you just clarify, is that completely separate to the Armed Forces Bill? And will the next Armed Forces Bill also be in the first Queen's speech?
Yeah. That's completely, the Prince separate.
Okay, fine, thank you. David Abrams.
Thank you. Very interesting, Vernon, very comprehensive, and to me a breath of fresh air. I was very pleased to see about you mentioning the welfare of the veterans, because I think that is something that we've got to address, because there's a lot of hardship out there and a lot of problems that they're being confronted with. Now, interesting on the 2%, because that was what was in my mind. But I'd like to, you mentioned about ISIS, very important here, and you said you would continue the fight against ISIS in Iraq. Now, I was with the Kurdistan Foreign Minister yesterday, and they're wanting quite a lot more support in all respects. More training for the Iraqi army, more help, more understanding. They've got 6,000 troops of Peshmerga who have been injured, and, they'd love some help from this country for medical aid and also for hospitalisation of them if necessary. And there's been a lot of discussion and debate about ISIS, especially last September. How far are we going to go? What's our projection on this? Are we going to sort of consider going into Syria or not? Or just having air power or boots on the ground? How are we going to combat ISIS? And are we going to work with the states in the Middle East in order to do so?
David, you got about 7 questions in there, but very, very good and important questions too. Just on the on the veterans, I mean, for me, there isn't anybody who's going to, in this room or anywhere, who's going to say we shouldn't do our best by our veterans. I mean, it's a, you know, to be fair, if Michael Fallon, the Liberal Democrat, you know, then everyone means it. I mean, I'm not, you know, it's not what I want to say though is somehow or other, government has a role to play in actually ensuring that the rhetoric becomes reality. And when I go around the country, one of the things that is frustrating is the postcoding of it. You know, that sometimes you think that works very well there, and another place it doesn't work very well. So there's a job of work to be done with respect to that. So you know, I just think, and I think some of the things that we've talked about, like the register interview programs and all of these sorts of things, you know, are part of trying to make that a reality. I mean, all of the local authorities are now signed up to it, of all parties, and somehow we have to try and make sure that you know, that the covenant means what it says when it actually comes to people, veterans receiving services. On Syria, we're just, whether it's in the right order or not, but on Syria, we've been very clear about Syria and in support for training some people outside of Syria, within Syria. I mean, the big question in Syria for people is, who do you support? You know, who is the opposition that you support in Syria, and how do you do that? And then, you know, that's very difficult. But I think there's work going on in terms of looking at how you do that, and some training that's going on and that we're involved with respect to that. In Iraq, obviously, the fight against ISIL, you know, extremely important. Went to the RAF base in Cyprus recently, saw the work that was going on there from our military personnel, and the ever ongoing work of Tornado. But there we go, to deal with that. So that was very good. And indeed, we've been supporting the Peshmerga, as you know, in various ways with respect to the work in Iraq. Just let me say, though, that one of the things that I think is really important, and one of the things we would want to do in government, is to try and ensure that the relationship between foreign policy, development, defence, that the interrelationship between all of those is crucial. And when I speak, and there are military people here who I know, when I speak to them, the military force that you use can do certain things for you, but it's not a substitute for political action and political knowledge and political action. And so, alongside, you know, the sort of the attempts about the issues about, you know, air power and who are the ground troops that are going to use, I mean, in the end, the Shia-Sunni divide, not only in Iraq but across the region, and now demonstrating itself and portraying itself in Yemen and so forth, with Iran and Saudi almost having these proxy wars going on. You know, these are real big political questions which we need to answer. So I just think that we, alongside all of that, we need to support the work of the Prime Minister in Iraq. I still call him a new Prime Minister. He's not so new, you know, but I mean, you know, the Prime Minister in Iraq, in the work that he's doing to try and reconcile Shia and Sunni elements. Because without that reconciliation and that work that's done there, it's very difficult to see, even if you get a military victory, where's the political stability that will follow that? And so I think that, you know, there's a great deal of work to be done with respect to that.
Thank you. Alan Lee Williams.
May I welcome your statement? I think it's, you put it very well. I believe it to be a profound statement. And I can assure you that the Atlantic Treaty Association will welcome what you have to say. And and emphasising the emphasis of the role of Labour governments in the past, which I liked the fact that you mentioned that, because I can say, I try and say this in a bipartisan spirit, that by and large, Labour governments have done rather well for the services. And at the present moment, the morale of the services is very low indeed. So I hope when you get to the SDL element of it, which is the tricky part, you admit it yourself.
Yes, it's just the tricky part, that's true.
That you will reflect on the need to do something seriously about the expenditure in terms of defence forces. I do believe very much in the 2% for both NATO. Yes, I agree very much with that, and I want to emphasise that on behalf of the Atlantic Treaty Association. But may I just conclude by saying that I am a former Labour MP. I better declare my interest here. And I was...
Ask a question, Alan.
Don't you agree that I was a former Labour MP then? And I worked with Dennis Healey as Parliamentary Private Secretary.
Right. Goodness me.
And
you've got the job, Alan. You know.
No, you've got.
Sorry.
You were emphasising the priorities, as you mentioned, from Bevin right through, and I'm pleased you mentioned Dennis Healey, because defence was safe in the hands of a Labour government, and I believe it will be again.
Well, let me just say this, Alan.
Find a question in that.
Yeah. So brilliant comment. Alan, on a serious point, let me just say this. If I have the privilege of holding this position, and who knows, if Labour were to win the election, and who knows, it would be something for me to try and do as well as some of those great people from the past have done, including in my own party. But actually, to be fair, because I try and be non-partisan sometimes, they're also looking back at some other people and to learn from them and to try and build on the work that they've done as well.
Okay, can we come to this end of the room now? Admiral McLean. Then I'll circle back around this way.
Hello, Rory McLean. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Institute. Thank you very much indeed. I was very pleased to hear that not only are you going to do an SDSR, but also a green paper. Now, I was fairly senior in the MOD when we did the 97-98 review when Tony Blair first came in. Generally heralded as being quite a good review. And of course, RUSI takes a very keen eye on these things. However, it had one flaw, and that is in your point you made about consultation and all the rest of it, we spent so much time consulting and studying policy and not enough time converting the requirement into capability and, more importantly, costing it. Yeah. And secondly, you made the point that this was going to be linked to the CSR. I have deep experience of 4 CSRs in the MOD, and I do not like the system. So my question to you is, might you consider doing a lessons learned from 97-98, quick and dirty, that combines the outcome of the underfunded SDSR and the MOD never caught up, and it's linked to the CSR?
Right, Rory, I'll have a look at that. All right, that's the. But I will have a look at it, because this is really serious, isn't it? You know, and I mean, I know it's a statement of the obvious, but it's a really important how we get a greater inclusivity into this discussion around, you know, defence and security. If I say defence, I apologise to the security people. I do mean and security. Okay, so just to say, but how we get great, and the whole point of the Green Paper idea is to actually try and open up. We have to, you know, the public has to have a, you know, feel involved. There's a need to rebuild confidence. There's a need for, you know, for politicians to view this, for industry, for former military personnel, existing, you know, serving military personnel, people who are defence academics, defence people who have got a keen interest in defence. Now, of course, that then opens up the problem of managing it. But it does seem to me, and I'd be quite honest about it, I would rather have the problem of managing a Green Paper process and making it work rather than not having it at all. And, you know, that's the truth of it. So there is a risk. It becomes, you know, loads of meetings, and in the end you end up with 2,000 pages, and people then say, well, nobody took any notice of my idea, and all of these sorts of things, and on all of that. But it is an important thing to have. The point I will take, and we will include, and I've got a couple of people from my office and they'll make a note of this. If I do get the job, I think connecting requirement to capability and cost, I think is a really important point that you've made. And because then that gives you the start choice that you've got. And if that's the budget you've got, that's what you can do with that, or you can't do it. And it may be you make the choice that you can't do it, but at least you've made it from a strategic point of view. You haven't done it the other way round. And, so we'll do that. We'll include that. Okay.
Okay, thanks. Andrea Berger, at the back there.
Hi, Andrea Berger, a Senior Research Fellow here at RUSI. If my ears didn't deceive me, I think I heard you saying that you would support doing continuous at-sea deterrence with 4 boats, which is essentially the status quo and what the Conservatives support as well. Did I get that right? And could you talk a little bit more about how you came to that decision?
Look, we've said that our policy is the renewal of the deterrent based on continuous at sea, with the emphasis on continuous. And where I get to 4 boats is that's what the Navy tell me when I went to Faslane. That's what they told me was needed for a continuous at sea deterrent. When I speak to experts in the MOD, when I speak to people outside of the MOD, former service, that is what they say. When I talk to academics, that is what they say. The only thing that we say is that obviously if the 4th boat won't be probably starting to be built till the middle of the next decade. If somebody then says technologically you can provide continuous, but there's an option with respect to, then you would look at it, of course. But that isn't the evidence at the moment. There's no evidence that you can do that. That you need those 4 boats to provide that continuous at sea deterrence, and that's why we continue to say that. The leader of the opposition last night in the debate on television said exactly the same. He said it last Thursday when we had a bit of a kerfuffle around the nuclear deterrent. We said that, I said it, and we will continue to say it. And that's so your ears haven't deceived you. That is absolutely what we've said.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan Beale.
Vernon, just on troop numbers, you've been critical of the government's cuts in regular forces. They are now saying that they wouldn't cut the regular size of the army, the Conservatives, to lower than 82,000. I wonder, you haven't made a specific pledge. I wonder if it's implicit from what you said in the past. But also, do you think that the Tories, given the spending commitments they're making, can deliver an army of 82,000 without any cuts?
Well, I don't. I mean, look, I've said what I've said about what we're going to do. We're going to look at everything through the Strategic Defence and Security Review. So, various conclusions are implicit within that. But look, the Defence Secretary was here last week. I'm not sure he announced it here, but certainly it was either announced here or around it, the triple lock. So we've got the renewal of the deterrence, the 1% real on the equipment budget, and a commitment to not reducing the size of the army. At the same time, I'm sure the Defence Secretary means that, but his Chancellor is telling him that you have to reduce your budget, according to the IFS, by 16%. Now, all I say to how does this add up? How can you do that? Where are the sums that anybody, can get to that reduces the MOD budget by 16% on the budgetary assumptions of the Chancellor, then commits to renewal of Trident, commits to the same numbers of troops, no cuts there, and to a 1% equipment budget increase. And I just say the figures don't add up. And, and that's where, the harsh reality of budgets match up against people unwilling to say difficult things. And what I'm saying here, and it goes back to the question, the very real and proper question that Caroline answered, I'm not prepared to stand in front of you before an election and promise things that I can't deliver or don't know that I can deliver. And we've made, the broader political point, we've tried to make a virtue of that in the election campaign on other departmental areas. And people in here will have different views about whether that's rubbish or not. But that's been our stance. I'm not prepared to do it. What I'm prepared to say is that we will have a strategic review, and the decisions we will make will come from that strategic outcome and that review, which we want everybody to play a part in. And there will be difficult choices within that, and we won't shirk from those, but there'll be choices made on real debate, inclusion, and discussion with others, and strategic objective.
Okay, thank you. We'll take as many questions as we can in the time available. I'm going to come around this side.
Am I too
long?
No,
it's fine. It's fine. We've got 15 minutes, so we'll make the most of it now. So I'm going to Deborah Haynes, then Hugh Ward, then Liz Quintana. So
Deborah Haynes from The Times. Your clear statement that Labour is not committed to 2% NATO target beyond next year is the most refreshingly honest response that by any major party. Can you kind of go a bit further? And it seems that the spending desires by the chiefs of the armed forces for the next 5 years will not add up to an increase, in the defence budget sufficient to meet the 2% target. And actually, in order to do that, it's going to require, come 2019, 2020, an additional £6 billion for the armed forces. And that's kind of like the point that obviously you said that the defence review after the election, everything's up for grabs, basically. But is that basically the reason why it is impossible to commit to a 2% blindly beyond next year? Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. I mean, the point about it is about trying to say, I mean, it's the broader economic context within which we're working, which is where we set the budget. And we've said, look, we're different. We have a different approach to the broader economic problems, how we eliminate the deficit, than the current government does, and the budget assumptions, if the government win the next election, take them. And, Ed Miliband was clear last night on the television when he said, outside of protected areas, there will be reductions in spending. And he said that last night. And you'll have heard him, many of you will have watched him, on the television say that. What I'm saying is that we will look at what the outcome of the Strategic Defence Review is, and we will then argue for funding that requirement. Now, that's within the broader economic context and that broader budget context and that broader budget framework. Now, I'm not going to go on and speculate then what that means in terms of after 15-16 and what it will mean by 19-20. But what I want is for us to have a defence which is confident and strategically led. And I believe that is possible even in a difficult economic climate.
Okay, thank you. Hugh Ward.
Some of the comments you've made are actually quite refreshing, but the one that's most refreshing to me is the fact that you're going to make your statements simple and understandable to a broader section of the population. What I'm taken with, though, is you will be, if you are in charge, you will have a timetable presented to you of people saying you're going to generate strategy over a very short space of time, and that strategy is going to be the underpinning for your argument with the Treasury as to how much money you need. So I was going to ask a question, but I'll just make a comment. It might be worth saying to people, we're going to take more time. So we're not going to stick to the agendas that you've defined because we need more time. And the reason I say that is because much of what you've described is no longer just about defence and military intervention. It is a broader requirement that spans government, and it becomes a governmental intervention, which then is required to be sustained over time and through alliances. So I would make the comment, it might be appropriate that when you take over, if you take over, that you make it clear that you will do it right rather than rush it.
Well, just a couple of things here. Thank you for that. I mean, we all try to do it right and not rush it, but I'm not sure about extending the time, for that. That's, so I don't want to, to mislead, unintentionally mislead anyone on that. I do try and be. So one of the things about having an accent like mine is it's sort of people naturally assume you'll be simple in terms of the way you explain things. But it's coming from North London, but there we go. But can I just make a point that you made, which I think is a really important point. It goes back, I think, partly to what David was saying. I think this need for a broader sense of what Britain is about. Actually, in the speech, which has been recorded and obviously is publicly available, I mean, there is a section in there where I talk about, the review that we're going to have with respect to diplomatic relations and also we should never forget, and I've made this point to a number of people who are in the audience here, we should never forget, although the SDSR is there, alongside the review with diplomatic review, of course there's a national security strategy review, which will lay out the threats as well. So that's going, so it's a fairly, goes back to a bit to your point, a rushed timetable or a busy timetable, let's put it that way. there. But if we can get that so that you've got all of those bits much more effectively coordinated through the work of the National Security Council and all the people that feed into that, I think that then starts to make Britain feel better about itself. I'll just make this point again. Sorry, Michael, I just want to make this point. I think it's a really important point. I've been in a job, as you said, 18 months. It is, people have used the word refreshing to me. It is refreshing for me when I go to different countries in the world to speak to those people, and in a non-patronising way, they want to know what Britain thinks. That doesn't necessarily mean they want warships and military planes and goodness knows what else. Sometimes one senior soldier or Air Force or Navy in the thing, but they want to know Britain's interested and Britain's concerned. And I just think, that is a big deal. And if we can get away from, of course, military intervention is necessary sometimes, but it's also what sometimes is traduced, is sometimes, thought not to be quite right. That soft power, which actually, sometimes the soft thing to do is the hardest thing to do. It's the truth of it. That soft power buys immense influence for dealing with some of the points that Dave was raising other people. And we should make sure that's all much more effectively married and put together.
OK, we'll try and get 3 more questions in and then see how we go after that. So Liz Quintana, there's a gentleman at the back, and then John Wilson, my next 3. Liz.
Yes, Liz Quintana, Director of Military Sciences here at RUSI, and thank you again for a really excellent session. I just wanted to get your opinion on the policy exchange report, which came out about 10 days ago, saving our armed forces from the fog of law, which was looking at the... So clearing the fog of law, saving our armed forces from defeat by judicial diktat, which is looking at the introduction of human rights law rather than sticking to law of armed conflict and international humanitarian law, and which will have implications on the way our armed forces are able to operate in the future, potentially. So just to see what your position was on that.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm right, and if I'm wrong, then I'll be corrected, because I don't unintentionally mean this. I think the current government have said that there should be a review around this. I think I'm right in saying that. And because there is a concern about the way in which that human rights legislation is perhaps operating in a way that wasn't expected, and I think that's something we would support as well, to have a look at that, just to see what is actually happening with that. Because let's be clear, about it. Soldiers, airmen, Air Force personnel, whoever, do not want to be and are not above the law. But we also have to be reasonable and sensible about it as well, and it's the balance between all of those competing things we need to get we need to get right. And I do think, to a certain extent, it may be that certain things are happening which weren't anticipated, and there's an unintended consequence. But I think this is something that is best done in calm reflection, rather than through banner headlines, because there is an issue here, and we need to make sure we get it right. Our troops and our armed forces personnel deserve that as well.
Thank you. The gentleman at the back, sir.
Alan Thompson, a RUSI member and formerly an Army officer. Out of the last SDSR came Army 2020, and one of the elements of that was a proposal to withdraw the British Army from Germany, which has started to happen. Given the tensions in Ukraine and with Russia, is that something you would revisit, or would you continue to plan on the complete withdrawal of the British Army from Germany by 2020?
Well, I mean, I think, look, we will continue with the plan, and we don't intend to change that. What we do, however, recognise is the need for us to be able to ensure that our NATO allies in Germany, but also in areas further east, and indeed the Baltic countries and so on, are aware that Britain remains committed to the NATO principles, Article 4 and indeed Article 5. And I think some of the reassurance measures that have been taken, the establishment of, which is sort of slightly contradictory, but the re-establishment of certain bases in parts of Eastern Europe, the various exercises that have taken place, and the basing of typhoons and so on, I think those sorts of things are important, and we will need to look to see what more needs to be done to ensure that we stabilise the situation in Eastern Europe, at the same time as recognising that at the end of the day it's diplomacy that will resolve that. Can I just make one other point around this, which again, Michael, I think has been suggested, and again is this soft power thing. I mean, it is interesting to me when you read some of the academic reports and some of what people say about the need for us to re-establish expertise around Russia, Eastern Europe, because that was regarded as sorted. Do you know what I mean? This isn't supposed to happen anymore. But I think that sort of expertise, and I think it's true. I think the Defence Select Committee said something about this recently. I think that's true not only in Russia and Eastern Europe, but in different parts of the world. That though people who are immersed in the culture, immersed in the language, understand the traditions, understand some of the things. I think that sort of thing needs to be, we need to look at that, again, because I think, again, that impacts on defence and impacts on stability and can do a lot to prevent fragility in different states. But going back to your point, we will have to look at how we, notwithstanding the withdrawal from Germany, how we ensure that we keep a commitment which is meaningful and seen to be meaningful in Eastern Europe as part of our NATO commitment.
Thank you. John Wilson.
John Wilson, a member of the Institute and a journalist. I'm a big fan of yours, as you probably know.
You've got as long as you want with the question, John. Now you're going to let me down here, right?
And I thought that you gave a wonderful talk today and answered the questions wonderfully well. I don't know whether you'll be able to answer mine quite so easily, though. Will Labour refuse power if the only way of getting it is through a deal with the SNP, who insist on us abandoning Trident?
We're not. That's why. Thanks, John. Look, I'm a great fan of yours, by the way, as well. But look, serious point here is, as Ed Miliband has been clear, as I've been clear, and all of us have been clear, we will not negotiate with the SNP about the defence and security of the country, and we will not do a deal on Trident. It's as simple as that. Said it time and time again. That will not stop. That will not stop. People speculating and others saying, this and that and so on. I'm telling you what our position is. That strong position, it's a fixed position, and it's a position that Ed Miliband has repeated on numerous occasions, and I'm repeating again here this morning.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll probably get one final question now, Madam.
Thank you very much.
It is on, just speak.
On? Yes. My name is Carmen Gonçalves. I'm political counsellor of the Dutch Embassy in London. Mr. Coker, you refer to the EU as important in the sense of security and defence, an important force multiplier. Shortly after the elections, the European Council in Brussels will deliberate on common security and defence policy and on the renewal of the review of the European security strategy. Could you elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts in that direction?
Well, look, let me just preface this by saying, of course, NATO remains, the principal alliance, the principal military alliance that we have, and it's important for me to emphasise that. But the point I was trying to make in the speech was also to say, of course, Europe is important to us, and working, with our colleagues. On the D-Day commemoration in Portsmouth, the Dutch Navy came into Portsmouth, and so on, as part of the D-Day commemorations in June last year. There is that cooperation. But look, should we cooperate together? Yes, we should. Do we need to look at how we can work effectively together to deal with common problems? Yes, we could. And Russia is an example for European cooperation, as is the Balkans, as are certain other things that we're doing. The point I'm making, however, is that if you're having an argument about whether you even should be a member of the European Union, it does make it difficult to then say to people you are serious about negotiating with them about future defence and security cooperation when you're not even sure you're going to be a part of the European Union. Now, it's for those who believe that to answer that question. But that's the question I'd pose. We want to be a part of the European Union. It's a very clear choice for people at the next election about that. If you want a referendum, on either way, if you vote UKIP, you can leave. If you vote Conservative, you may leave, but there'll be a referendum. We're not saying that because we don't believe that is in our interests to do that. And I think that immediately changes the climate, immediately changes the atmosphere in which discussions take place. And so on that basis, I think You know, of course we would want to look at how we work together, cooperate together, deal with common issues together, and try and find a way forward on common problems.
Thank you, Mr. Gogi. It's exactly 12 o'clock, and we do have to now leave it there. I should say that on Monday, the 20th of April, as I mentioned at the beginning, at 11 o'clock, Lord Wallace of Salter, Lord William Wallace, will be here to talk about Liberal Democrat policy. And on Friday the 24th, next Friday, at 1:30, we have a Forces TV forum here, where we'll have representatives from the Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrats, UKIP and SNP and RUSI, and we'll be doing a live broadcast forum specifically on defence and security. That's next Friday, this time next Friday at 1:30. But I have to say, this has been a very good session, 1 hour session. It's said in many places that if voting changed anything, it would be illegal. And in many countries it would, and it is, but not here. And in this election campaign, I think defence and security have been a bit more prominent than some of us have been hanging around the bazaars of Whitehall and Westminster expected. This has been interesting, the way it has come up the agenda. And I think that we are having, and I'm pleased and proud that RUSI is part of this, we are having a very intelligent debate, I think, on defence and security questions. And I would endorse the comments that have been made around the audience, Vernon, that I think your presentation today has been refreshing and direct and clear, and I think it has added to that debate, and we're very grateful for it.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.